Okay, so recently I had the privilege, or not so privilege, of being one of the few people stupid enough to see Madame Web in theaters. Now, for those of you that don't know, Madame Web is the newest Sony Spider-Man movie, or excuse me, the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters. Who named this? But because of that, I realized even though I did rank it in my Marvel tier ranking video, I haven't actually seen the movie Morbius. I honestly had just thought that I had seen the movie because at this point I basically knew every single thing that happened. Jared Leto is a doctor who becomes a vampire and then he fights an evil, weird, shirtless, dancing Matt Smith, and then Tyrese Gibson is there with a metal arm for whatever reason. But because I feel like I've seen this movie, I never really got around to watching it. So now with the release of Madame Web and its wonderful critical acclaim and high Rotten Tomato scores, the question really was persisting. Is Madame Web actually worse than Morbius? And there was only one way to find out. Okay, so essentially the plot of this movie is Morbin thinks that he can use bat DNA to fix his rare degenerative blood disease, which not only cures him, but also gives him abs. But here's the thing, the twist that this movie thinks it's gonna pull off on you is that his lifelong best friend forever, Doctor Who, also has the same rare disease. So as soon as you know the direction of where this movie is going, it is incredibly obvious that it's gonna follow the overused concept for superhero movies, which is that the good guy and the bad guy both have the same powers and eventually and inevitably are gonna end up in a CGI fight of using the same powers. Something that we have seen way too often. But if you're wondering how a loser like Morbius is able to afford all of this research, it turns out his best friend from childhood, Matt Smith, has not only been funding his entire research, but is somehow like super rich and him and Jared Leto just haven't died yet. But in order to do this super top secret, extremely dangerous and incredibly expensive procedure in order to cure his disease, for whatever reason, Morbius needs to be in international waters. Now this is where the movie really starts to show that it is nothing like the trailers made it out to be. In the very first trailer for the movie, all the way back in January of 2020, Tyrese Gibson's character says this.
Dr. Michael Morbius, you've been missing for 2 months. Then you were found on a container ship that washed up off of Long Island.
But not only does that not happen, the cargo ship is completely different in the movie than any of the trailers make it out to be. Because I went back and watched every single trailer before watching this movie, and each one of them showed the cargo ship to be some kind of like mysterious, what's going on? Morbius has been missing, who killed these people kind of mystery, but it is nothing like that. But all the cargo ship really is that after Morbin USA injects himself with the new cure, he turns into like the raw, pure version of a vampire, and because of that, he's super hungry for human blood and then just kills everybody on the ship. But what's even funnier about that is later in the movie, they even drop a line saying that it's okay that he killed everybody on the cargo ship because they were all mercenaries for hire, so it's not a big deal because Morbius is a good guy. Just so everybody knows, in case you didn't know, Morbius is a bad guy in the comics. He's not a good guy. Him and Venom and Craven, they're all bad guys, but in their movies they're going to be looked as good guys. So if you're worried about that, don't worry. Morbius is a good guy in this movie, kind of, sorta. But also on this cargo ship, Schmeichel Schmorbius brought his vague doctor colleague love interest, Martine, with him. And when everything starts to go down with him killing everybody on the ship, she falls over and bonks her head, which puts her into some kind of like weird, vague coma. And because Michael decides that after drinking everybody's blood and coming back to as a normal man, he just leaves. He just dips out, says, peace out, I'm out of here, no thank you. Now, the reason this is so unintentionally funny is because all Morbius does after leaving the cargo ship is just go back to the hospital where he works and goes back into his weird basement lab, which is also, by the way, where he's keeping a giant fish tank of angry swirling bats, and nobody is questioning it. Now, this leads us to the scene in every comic book movie where the main hero decides he's gonna practice and figure out what kind of powers he has. So in case you were wondering what Morbin Sorbin Morbius's powers are, he can see bullets in slow-mo, he can move really, really fast, but also leaves like this weird trail of smoke behind him. He really likes to drink blood, but don't worry, if you're wondering if he was going to have to drink regular human blood, he's not going to have to, because Morbius also created this fake synthetic blood that has been more effective than penicillin, and he can just drink that without having to worry about drinking human blood, so we can kind of skirt around the fact that he's a vampire and vampires need to drink human blood, but he's just happens to be the person on the planet who created fake blood, so it's all good. He's got super hearing, he can fly, he has this weird bat sonar power, and of course, abs. Now, this entire time that Morbius is doing his Rocky montage of testing powers, the cargo ship drifts ashore, Tyrese Gibson's character is introduced as an agent who's on the tail of Morbius, and Martine is taken to a hospital because, you know, she did hit her head pretty hard and probably needed a doctor a lot sooner, but Morbius decided that testing his powers was probably a more important move. So then Matt Smith comes to visit Morbius in his lab and he's all like, hey man, you're cured. I want the cure. Give me the cure. But Morbius is all like, no, it's a curse because you have to drink blood. Although he doesn't actually tell Milo anything about it. Actually, Morbius in this movie doesn't explain to anybody what's going on. He doesn't say for one moment in this movie, hey, I was on a cargo ship and I thought this idea of splicing bat DNA and human DNA would work for curing my disease, but it really just turned me into this weird vampire monster. Can somebody help me out? He doesn't say that at all. And also, if your best friend had the same disease as you and you woke up and you had to kill like 8 people on a cargo ship by drinking their blood, maybe just tell him that, because clearly the whole vague, I don't know what's going on, it's a curse thing is gonna still make Matt Smith go back to his TARDIS and take the cure anyways, because spoiler alert, that's what he does. But this kicks off a series of events where a nurse is killed at the hospital by having her blood drank. Dr. Ding Dong gets caught being a liar by the agents of Tyrese Gibson and ends up inevitably going to jail. Then Matt Smith comes to visit him in jail, and it's revealed, if you could believe it or not, that he was the one who killed the nurse because, oh my god, he did take the cure. Everybody saw that coming. So the effects that they chose for the character movements when they use their powers are incredibly distracting. There's this like weird wispy stream coming from them and they look like wet farts being blown around. I will say though, luckily something good does come from this fight sequence because it leads into my personal favorite moment from this entire movie, where Morbin Time jumps in front of a subway train and looks like a bag of chips floating in the wind. It's very noticeable when you watch the movie trailers before the movie how much of this thing was changed and altered before it ever came out. There was clearly supposed to be some kind of plot line involving Michael Keaton and probably more references to the Venom universe, but for whatever reason, Sony just decided to axe it all and make a very weird and very poorly edited story that clearly is missing some very important parts. But that's okay, because after the bag of chips in the wind and the really terrible fight chase scene, we are treated to what could be considered the greatest scene in cinema history. Matt Smith, for whatever reason, and I don't know what Sony told him or his agents to make him give 110% in this scene, but for about 30 to 45 seconds, we get a dance number of Matt Smith in the bathroom, shirtless, staring at himself in the mirror, just having a ball. Madame Web doesn't even come close to having a scene that matches this. That is one thing that I can definitely say about Morbius over Madame Web. The performances in Madame Web all felt like each actress was filming separately in a closet and reading off of cue cards. There is zero chemistry between any of the 4 leads in Madame Web, and all of them feel like they don't want to be there. None of them in Madame Web feel like they're even trying. With Morbius, at least everyone is trying to make this movie somewhat watchable. It feels like for the most part, they at least wanted to try and turn this garbage dumpster vomit pile of a script into something people could enjoy. But again, it goes back to my point that clearly things were left out of this movie and there are crucial plot elements that just feel like they're missing more parts to it. Now, I said at the beginning that Tyrese Gibson had a dope metal arm in this movie, and that's what I thought. But it turns out not only does he not have a cool metal arm, but he also has nothing to do in this movie. In all the trailers, he has a metal arm in this shot right here. but nowhere in the movie does this arm appear. He was clearly meant to have some kind of modification so he could participate in one of the action sequences, but not only does he get no action sequences to be in, but he also doesn't do anything for this entire movie other than just follow Morbius around as the events happen, and then during the final fight, he just stands in the street over a hole as some bats fly out of it. But because this movie also needs to have some more stakes, Milo also kidnaps Martine, his Dr. Love interest. Now, this led to a scene that not only made me laugh, but also kind of grossed me out a little bit at the same time. Now, Morbin Munchos arrives a little too late to save his love interest, and as he's holding her in his arms, and she leans in to give him a kiss, and they're staring in each other's eyes, she just straight up bites his lip and then drinks his blood. Now, I'm pretty confident this was supposed to be some kind of way to bring her back to life for the sequel that they thought they were gonna get, but well, I don't think that's happening. It's just such a weird way to do it, and even the look on Jared Leto's face is like, yo, what the fuck? Did you just bite me? And she like kind of licks her lips afterwards, and it's just gross and weird, and it's just very off-putting. But then the final showdown takes place between Morbin Mike Tyson and Milo, which honestly is pretty lackluster as well, because all that happens is Morbin just takes a bunch of bats and then like punches Milo with it, and then he just runs up and stabs him. But this is probably one of the biggest problems that Morbius the motion picture suffers from, and that's that the villain became bad just for the sake of being bad. Milo really has no reason to act this way and has no real indication as to why he's acting this way, and you can't even really blame it on the cure that they both took, because clearly Morbius is okay and not trying to go kill innocent people, but for no reason at all, because Milo was bullied as a kid and has a rare disease, he's just like, yeah, fuck everybody, I'm killing you all. It's time for you to suffer the way that I've suffered. I'm gonna kill this innocent nurse who has kids. I'm gonna kill this innocent newspaper stand person who probably has kids. I'm just gonna kill whoever I want. And it just feels very forced and very out of character for everything else we see this character do. And it's weird because there's honestly no real threat in this movie. There are two agents that are chasing Morbius around, but even when they catch up to him and put him in jail, about 5 seconds later, Morbius just escapes jail, and then they never try to put him back into jail. And then Milo, the main villain, again, is just evil when the plot needs him to be evil. But I will say that overall, Morbius isn't nearly as bad as I thought it was gonna be. I did, however, watch this movie twice in preparation for this video, and I honestly forgot about 80% of it. However, with Madame Web, I saw that movie once over 2 weeks ago, and I feel like every single day the entirety of that movie is just playing rent-free in my head, and I absolutely hate it. Madame Web is truly terrible on every single level. Besides Adam Scott's performance and Dakota Johnson clearly not wanting to be in this movie after she realized it wasn't an MCU movie, but a Sony no Spider-Man movie, there is not much that's worth watching in it. The acting is flat, and the plot is not only slow, but so poorly written that it's the first movie that I truly believe was written by AI. You could tell me that everything in this movie was created by AI, including the performances, the special effects, all of it, and I would probably believe you because that's how bad this movie really is. I've seen comparisons that Madame Web looks like a fan film with a bigger budget, but even fan films to some extent show a little bit of love and attention to the characters. This feels like somebody that does not understand not only superhero movies, but also just comic book characters in general, wrote this movie and thought they were doing something clever, but it ends up just being a 2-hour snooze fest. At the end of the day, Madame Web isn't even so bad it's good, or a movie that you tell your friends to watch because it's so bad you want other people to see it. Madame Web is just straight through and through a bad movie with zero redeeming qualities. Either way, I would just stay away from any movie that opens up with "in association with Marvel."